I stood perfectly still as the champagne ran down my face, soaking into my emerald silk gown. The crystal drops caught the light from the Christmas tree behind me. Around me, 300 guests in designer clothes gasped and pulled out their phones. But it was the laughter that cut deepest. Victoria Ashford's high-pitched cackle rose above the shocked whispers. "Oh, Damien, you're terrible," she squealed, already filming on her iPhone. But her voice carried pride, not discipline. Her husband, Richard, joined in, his booming laugh echoing off the marble floors. "Boys will be boys," he announced. Just some Christmas fun. I was 39 years old. I had built a $2.3 billion clean energy company from nothing, and I was standing in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Foundation Centennial Holiday Gala, dripping with $400 a bottle Dom Carignan that a 15-year-old had just dumped on my head for sport. Let me back up, but before we start, comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe because tomorrow's story will blow your mind. My name is Simone Reeves, and 3 weeks before Christmas 2024, I received an embossed invitation to the Ashford Foundation Centennial Holiday Gala. The Ashfords were old money, the kind that built entire city blocks. Their company, Ashford Energy Group, controlled 40% of the Northeast's power grid. For 6 months, my company, Solar Bridge Industries, had been negotiating a strategic partnership with them. $680 million. The deal would revolutionize how renewable energy integrated with traditional power systems. My legal team said we were 95% there, just needed final signatures after the holidays. The invitation felt like a celebration, an unofficial welcome into their world. I should have known better. December 18th, 2024. I arrived at the Metropolitan Club at 7 p.m. The doormen wore Santa hats with their formal uniforms. Inside, the ballroom looked like a winter wonderland designed by someone with unlimited money and zero taste. A 30-foot Christmas tree dominated the center, dripping with Swarovski crystal ornaments. Ice sculptures of reindeer lined the walls. Real snow fell gently from hidden ceiling vents. I wore emerald green that night, a silk gown I'd saved 3 months to buy because I knew this crowd would judge. My hair was pressed and styled in an elegant updo. Diamond studs caught the light. I looked successful, polished, worthy of being there. That was my first mistake, thinking I could ever be worthy in their eyes. At 7:47 p.m., I felt someone watching me. I turned and saw a teenage boy leaning against one of the ice sculptures, flanked by 3 friends. He wore an expensive suit with the tie deliberately loosened, that calculated rebellion only rich kids can pull off. His friends all had their phones out. The boy was Damien Ashford III, 15 years old, son of Richard and Victoria, heir to the Ashford fortune. He started walking toward me with crystal champagne flute in hand. His friends followed, already recording. Every instinct I'd developed in 20 years of being the only black woman in hostile boardrooms screamed danger. But I held my ground, smiled professionally. "Welcome to our party," Damien said. His voice cracked slightly, but his eyes were cold, much older than 15. "Thank you," I replied carefully. "It's a beautiful event." "Yeah." He rocked back on his heels, that smirk growing wider. "My parents work really hard to keep things exclusive. Maintaining standards." The emphasis on standards made my skin prickle. "I'm sure they do," I said, already planning my exit. That's when his arm shot forward. The champagne arced through the air. I watched it come, maybe half a second to process what was happening. Then the cold liquid hit my face, splashing into my eyes, running down my neck, soaking into my carefully chosen gown. The emerald silk turned dark and heavy. Champagne dripped from my hair, ruining the $200 styling. The ballroom went silent. Then the phones came out. Dozens of them, all pointed at me, recording my humiliation in 4K. Victoria Ashford pushed through the crowd, iPhone raised. "Oh my God, Damien!" But she was laughing, actually laughing while filming. You got her good. Richard appeared beside his wife, his phone out too. That's my boy, keeping the party interesting. I stood there, dripping, while the Ashford family documented my degradation like it was entertainment. Around me, their social circle tittered nervously. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. No one told the boy to apologize. No one offered help. A young server, a black girl who couldn't have been older than 20, rushed forward with napkins. Her hands shook as she gave them to me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she whispered. I took the napkins. My hands were steady, even though rage burned through every nerve. Damien stood there, empty champagne flute dangling from his fingers, waiting for my reaction. He wanted tears. He wanted anger. He wanted me to make a scene so they could call me aggressive, unstable, exactly what they expected. I dried my face slowly. The silence grew uncomfortable. Even Victoria's laughter faded. "Thank you," I said to Damien, my voice clear and controlled. "You just made my final decision very easy." Confusion flickered across his face. I walked past him, champagne still dripping from my ruined gown, and headed straight for the stage. My heels clicked against marble, each step measured and deliberate. The stage manager looked panicked. "Ms. Reeves, maybe you should—" "I'm fine," I said, taking my place behind the podium. 300 wealthy faces stared up at me. Phones were still recording. Good. Let them record this. "Good evening," I began. I had prepared remarks about partnership and progress, but recent events require a different message. In the crowd, I saw Richard Ashford's smile start to falter. "Effective immediately, Solar Bridge Industries is terminating all negotiations regarding the proposed $680 million strategic partnership with Ashford Energy Group." The ballroom erupted, gasps, shocked murmurs, the sound of Victoria's phone clattering to the floor. "Our company was founded on principles of dignity, respect, and integrity. We choose partners who share these values. Tonight has demonstrated conclusively that Ashford Energy Group does not." Richard was pushing through the crowd now, his face turning red. "To quote someone in this room," I said, looking directly at him, "boys will be boys, and companies will be companies. We all make choices. We all live with consequences." I stepped back from the podium. The champagne-soaked gown clung to my legs as I descended the stairs, but I kept my spine straight, my head high. Richard reached the stage as I passed him. "This is insane. You can't—" "I just did," I replied, not stopping. The exit seemed miles away. Every step felt like walking through fire, but I made it to the grand doors without breaking stride. Behind me, chaos erupted. My driver had the car waiting. As soon as the door closed, I finally let my shoulders drop. "Where to, Ms. Reeves?" "Home." 73 messages, missed calls from board members, investors, my legal team. The video was already viral. I watched it once, saw Damien's smirk, heard Victoria's proud laughter, saw myself standing there soaking wet and perfectly composed. The comments were split. Half supported me, half called me unstable, emotional, said I'd destroyed a major deal over a teenage prank. I turned off my phone. At my penthouse, I peeled off the ruined gown and stood under scalding water until my skin turned red. The champagne washed away, but the memory of their laughter stayed. At 11:34 p.m., my secure email chimed. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the message was detailed and formal. "Miss Reeves, my name is Dorothy Chen. I worked for the Ashford family for 31 years as their head housekeeper. What happened to you tonight was not an isolated incident. I have documentation, recordings, and evidence of actions they've taken that would destroy them completely. Things they've paid millions to hide. I'm ready to share everything. It's time someone held them accountable. Please meet with me tomorrow, 8 a.m., Riverside Cafe on 5th. I'll be wearing a blue scarf. Come alone." I read it 3 times. This could be a setup, a trap. The Ashfords trying to gather evidence for a lawsuit, but something in the precise language told me it was real. I typed back, "I'll be there." The reply came instantly. "Thank you. You're not alone in this fight anymore." I sat on my bed and stared at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Richard Ashford was probably calling lawyers. Victoria was likely coordinating with their PR team. Damien was probably bragging to his friends about his viral moment. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled up my contacts and called my head of security. "Miles, I need a full team tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., Riverside Cafe on 5th. "Everything okay, Miss Reeves?" "It will be." Next, I called Jordan Pierce, my head of legal. She answered on the first ring, clearly already awake and dealing with fallout. "Simone, thank God. Listen, the board is panicking. Schedule an emergency meeting for tomorrow afternoon and get our litigation team ready. We're going to need them." "For defense or offense?" I smiled for the first time since the champagne hit my face. "Offense." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Times, dates, exact quotes. The server who'd helped me, I needed her name. The security cameras in that ballroom, I needed that footage. If the Ashfords wanted war, I'd give them more. But I'd fight smart. At 2 a.m., I finally tried to sleep. My phone buzzed constantly with news alerts. The story had gone national. CEO cancels $680 million deal after holiday gala incident. The comment sections were brutal. People defended Damien because he was just a kid. People attacked me for being too sensitive. People debated whether the attack was racially motivated or just teenage stupidity. Nobody seemed to care that a 15-year-old had been raised to think humiliating people was entertainment, that his parents had filmed it proudly, that an entire ballroom of wealthy, powerful people had watched and done nothing. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans, applied minimal makeup, pulled my hair into a low bun. At 7:15 a.m., Miles picked me up with 3 additional security personnel. Riverside Cafe was a small French place tucked on a quiet side street, the kind of spot where you could have private conversations without being overheard. At exactly 8 a.m., an elderly Asian woman walked in. She wore a blue wool scarf and carried a worn leather bag that looked heavy. Despite her 70-something years, she moved with careful dignity. I stood. "Ms. Chen?" She nodded and joined me at my corner booth. Miles positioned himself near the door. "Thank you for coming," Dorothy said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I should," I admitted. "But something told me you were serious." "I am." She placed the leather bag on the table between us. She unzipped it and pulled out a stack of journals. The covers were worn, the pages yellowed with age. The earliest was dated March 3rd, 1993. 31 years. I documented everything because I knew someday someone would need proof. Rich people think the help is invisible. She opened the first journal. Her handwriting was precise, every entry marked with date, time, and location. April 12, 1993. Richard Ashford Sr. fired Eduardo Martinez for asking about overtime pay. Called him a lazy immigrant in front of entire kitchen staff. Eduardo has 3 children and a sick wife. Richard laughed while security escorted him out. I read entry after entry, decades of cruelty, documented in careful detail. But that's not all, Dorothy said. She pulled out a small digital recorder. 10 years ago, I started recording conversations. She pressed play. Richard Ashford's voice filled our corner booth. "I don't care how you do it. Fire her and make sure she can't get another job in this city. These people need to learn their place." My hands clenched around my coffee cup. Dorothy produced more items. Flash drives full of audio files. Photographs of private parties where staff was humiliated for entertainment. Internal memos proving systematic wage theft. Financial documents showing embezzlement schemes spanning 3 generations. "The $680 million deal with you," Dorothy said quietly, "they needed it desperately. They've been hiding massive losses for years. That partnership was supposed to cover hundreds of millions in missing funds before their next audit. She spread out bank statements and transfer records. The evidence was damning. Why now? Why come forward after 31 years? Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. My granddaughter sent me that video last night. I watched you stand there while they laughed, while everyone filmed. I saw myself 30 years ago, staying quiet while they hurt people. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. But seeing you refuse to break, it woke something in me. I'm 74 years old. What can they do to me now? I spent my life being invisible. I want to be seen before I die. I reached across the table and squeezed her weathered hand. They'll try to destroy you, I warned. They'll call you disgruntled, senile, a liar. Let them try, Dorothy's voice strengthened. Every document is dated. Every photo has metadata. Every recording is time-stamped. I made sure everything would hold up in court because I knew this day would come. We spent 4 hours in that cafe. Dorothy walked me through 31 years of evidence, providing context and connections. She'd documented which employees were forced out. She'd recorded Damien at age 6 throwing food at servers while his parents applauded. She'd photographed Victoria directing staff to stand in the background of charity events so the pictures would look more diverse. The evidence wasn't just overwhelming, it was methodical, undeniable, and absolutely devastating. What do you want? I asked finally. Money? Protection? Justice, Dorothy said simply. I want them to face consequences for once in their lives. Not just Richard and Victoria. Their parents did the same things. Their grandparents before that. She closed her journals carefully. And I want other people like me to know they don't have to stay quiet. That someone will believe them. That evidence matters more than money. I pulled out my phone and called Jordan. Clear your schedule for the next week. I'm sending over evidence that's going to change everything. When I hung up, Dorothy smiled. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for being brave enough to speak, I replied. We left the cafe together. Miles helped Dorothy into our car, treating her with gentle respect. As we drove toward my office, I watched the city pass by and thought about Damien's smirk, Victoria's proud laughter, Richard's dismissive arrogance. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. At 2 p.m. on December 19th, my entire executive team crowded into Solar Bridge's main conference room. Jordan Pierce stood at the head of the table, organizing Dorothy's evidence. My CFO, James Martinez, reviewed the financial documents with growing disbelief. My head of PR, Kennedy Brooks, scrolled through social media, her expression grim. The Ashfords just filed a lawsuit, Kennedy announced. They're claiming defamation, breach of contract, and emotional distress. They're asking for $950 million in damages. James looked up sharply. That's more than the deal was worth. They're trying to bankrupt us, Jordan said flatly. Bury us in legal fees before we can fight back. I stood at the window, watching the city below. What else? Kennedy swiped through her tablet. Richard gave an interview to Bloomberg 30 minutes ago. He's calling you unstable, says you've had concerning behavioral patterns for months. Victoria's on Good Morning America tomorrow, playing the worried mother protecting her traumatized son. Traumatized, I repeated. He poured champagne on me and his parents filmed it laughing. They're rewriting the narrative, Kennedy said. Damien's now the victim, a confused teenager who made a mistake and you've turned it into a vendetta. Jordan pulled up a video on the main screen. Richard on Bloomberg looking somber. Miss Reeves is a talented businesswoman, but recent events suggest she may be under extreme stress. Her decision to void a nearly finalized partnership over a teenage prank raises serious questions about her judgment. The interviewer leaned forward sympathetically. Some are saying this reaction seems disproportionate. We tried to handle this privately, Richard continued, but her continued attacks on our family, especially targeting our 15-year-old son, have forced us to take legal action. Our stock dropped 8% this morning. 3 major investors called emergency meetings. The board wants to meet tonight, Jordan added quietly. They're concerned about your leadership. I stood from the window. Show them Dorothy's evidence. All of it. For the next 3 hours, we organized 31 years of documentation. Jordan's legal team verified every document. Kennedy prepared media strategies. James calculated the financial impact, estimating over $340 million in embezzlement, wage theft, and fraud. At 7 p.m., I faced Solar Bridge's board of directors. 12 faces stared at me across the mahogany table. Some looked worried, others looked angry. None looked supportive. Simone, board chairman Gerald Foster began, "We need to discuss the Ashford situation. Shareholders are demanding answers." "I have answers," I nodded to Jordan, who distributed folders to each board member. "The Ashfords aren't suing because I overreacted. They're suing because I discovered they're criminals." Silence fell as they opened the folders. "What you're looking at is 31 years of evidence provided by their former head housekeeper. Systematic discrimination, wage theft, embezzlement, fraud, and witness tampering. The $680 million partnership wasn't a business opportunity, it was a cover-up." Gerald's face had gone pale. "This is authenticated?" "Every page," Jordan confirmed. "We've had 3 independent forensic accountants verify the embezzlement." I stood commanding the room. "The Ashfords think they can silence us with lawsuits and character assassination, but we have evidence that will destroy them, not just their company, their entire legacy. If we release this," one board member said hesitantly, "they'll come at us even harder." "They're already coming at us as hard as they can. The difference is we have the truth. And tomorrow morning, so will everyone else." The board voted unanimously to support my decision and fund a full legal counteroffensive. At 11 p.m., I was still in my office when Kennedy knocked. "You need to see this." She pulled up a news segment showing Victoria Ashford on her mansion steps, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Behind her, Damien stood looking young and vulnerable. "Our son made a mistake," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "A childish, foolish mistake. But Miss Reeves has turned it into a crusade. Damien can't sleep. He's terrified of what she might do next." The camera zoomed in on Damien's face. His eyes were red-rimmed, his expression scared. "I just want to apologize," he said softly. "I was stupid, but now she's attacking my whole family, and I don't understand why she hates us so much." The reporter's voiceover was damning. "While Reeves celebrates canceling a major deal, the Ashford family struggles with the aftermath of what they call an overreaction." I felt rage burn through me. "They're making him the victim." "It's working," Kennedy said grimly. "Social media's turning. They're saying you're bullying a teenager." My phone buzzed. Text messages from colleagues, some supportive, many questioning. The Ashfords were executing a perfect PR campaign. "We release everything tomorrow morning," I said. "Every document, every recording, every photograph, simultaneously across every major news outlet." "The press conference is scheduled for 9 a.m., Kennedy confirmed. I worked through the night, preparing my statement. At 3 a.m., I finally went home to shower and change. At 6 a.m., I was back at the office. By 8 a.m., reporters were gathering outside Solar Bridge Tower. The press conference room was packed by 8:45 a.m. Cameras lined the back wall. The energy was electric. At 9 a.m. exactly, I walked to the podium. Dorothy Chen sat in the front row, her leather bag on her lap. Jordan stood to my right, Kennedy to my left. "Good morning," I began. 3 days ago, I was publicly humiliated at a holiday gala. When I canceled our partnership, the Ashfords claimed I overreacted. Today, I'm going to show you why that moment wasn't about champagne, it was about exposed corruption. I gestured to the screens behind me, where Dorothy's first journal entry appeared. For 31 years, Dorothy Chen worked for the Ashford family. She documented everything she witnessed. The room erupted in whispers as I clicked through pages of journals. Reporters frantically took notes. But documentation is just the beginning. I played the first audio recording. Richard Ashford's voice filled the room. "I don't care if she has proof. Pay her off and make her disappear. These people always have a price." Gasps rippled through the audience. I played more recordings, each one worse than the last. Richard ordering evidence destroyed. Victoria laughing about firing a pregnant employee. Damien at age 12 already learning to treat staff with contempt. "These recordings prove a pattern of criminal behavior," I stated, "but the financial crimes are even more severe." Jordan stepped forward with charts. "The Ashford family has embezzled approximately $340 million from Ashford Energy Group over the past 15 years. They created shell companies, falsified records, and used charitable foundations to hide stolen money." The journalists exploded with questions, but I raised my hand for silence. The $680 million partnership wasn't a business deal. It was a cover-up. They needed our money to hide their theft before their next audit. I looked directly into the cameras. I didn't cancel that deal because a teenager poured champagne on me. I canceled it because I discovered I was partnering with criminals. Dorothy stood slowly. The room fell silent as she approached the podium. "I'm Dorothy Chen," she said, her voice steady. "I worked for the Ashfords for 31 years. I kept silent because I was afraid. But watching them try to destroy Miss Reeves for refusing to accept their abuse, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Some of us don't have power or money, but we have truth. And truth doesn't expire." The press conference lasted 2 hours. By the time we finished, reporters were racing out to file their stories. Within 30 minutes, the news broke everywhere. Breaking: Ashford family accused of decades of fraud and abuse. Housekeeper's evidence exposes billionaire family's dark secrets. $340 million embezzlement scheme revealed. I watched the coverage from my office. Every major network led with our story. The carefully crafted image of the Ashford family shattered in real time. At 11:47 a.m., federal agents arrived at Ashford Energy Group headquarters. News helicopters captured it all. Black SUVs surrounding the building, agents in FBI jackets entering through the main doors. Employees streaming out with boxes. Richard Ashford appeared on the building's front steps at 12:15 p.m., flanked by lawyers. His face was red, his composure completely gone. "This is a coordinated attack by a vindictive woman," he shouted at the cameras. "Every allegation is false. Mr. Ashford, did you embezzle $340 million? Did you order evidence destroyed?" Richard's lawyers pulled him back inside, but the damage was done. By 2 p.m., Ashford Energy Group's stock had crashed 43%. Trading was suspended. Partner companies issued statements cutting ties. Dorothy and I watched from my office as the empire crumbled. "They're done," she said softly, tears running down her face. "After all these years, they're finally done." My phone rang. Gerald Foster. "Simone, the SEC just announced a formal investigation. The FBI's involved." "Good," I said. Over the next week, the dominoes fell faster than anyone expected. December 20th, Richard Ashford was arrested trying to flee to his private island. The footage of federal agents tackling him at the airport went viral. December 21st, Victoria Ashford was arrested at her country club's Christmas luncheon. She screamed about her rights while being handcuffed in front of her horrified social circle. December 23rd, Damien was removed from his elite prep school and placed in mandatory counseling. The school released a statement condemning his behavior. December 24th, Christmas Eve, I sat in my office reading the final reports. Ashford Energy Group was being restructured under new leadership. The Ashford name was being removed from buildings, scholarships, and charitable foundations. 3 generations of legacy, demolished in 1 week. Dorothy visited me that afternoon. She looked lighter somehow. Years of burden finally lifted.
My granddaughter wants to meet you. She's studying law, says you inspired her. You inspired me, I replied honestly. Your courage made this possible. We inspired each other, she smiled. That's how change happens. On Christmas morning, I woke up to news that Solar Bridge's stock had hit an all-time high. Companies were lined up to partner with us, specifically citing our ethical standards. My phone buzzed with a message from Kennedy. Check your email. I found an invitation. The National Business Ethics Council wanted to honor me with the Integrity Award at their annual gala. The ceremony would be held at the Metropolitan Club, the same ballroom where Damien had dumped champagne on me. I accepted immediately.
On January 15th, 2025, I returned to that ballroom. This time, I wore a stunning red gown. This time, when I entered, the entire room stood and applauded. Dorothy accompanied me, elegant in deep purple. Together, we walked past the spot where I'd stood dripping and humiliated just 4 weeks earlier. The awards ceremony was beautiful. Speaker after speaker praised my courage, my integrity, my refusal to accept injustice. But the moment that mattered most came when Dorothy joined me on stage. This woman, I said, my arm around her shoulders, spent 31 years documenting truth because she knew someday it would matter. She's the real hero of this story, not me. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After the ceremony, I stood in the exact spot where Damien had attacked me. The marble floors had been cleaned and polished. No trace of champagne remained. But I remembered. I remembered his smirk, his parents' laughter, the phone's recording. I remembered feeling powerless and degraded. And I remembered choosing to fight back. Not with anger or revenge, but with truth, with evidence, with the courage of an elderly housekeeper who'd spent decades waiting for the right moment to speak. Kennedy approached with her tablet. You'll want to see this. She showed me a news article. Richard Ashford had been denied bail. Victoria's trial date was set for March. Damien was in a juvenile rehabilitation program. The Ashford name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now a cautionary tale. How does it feel? Kennedy asked. I looked around the ballroom, at Dorothy laughing with young activists she'd inspired, at the space that had witnessed both my humiliation and my triumph. It feels like the beginning, I said, because this wasn't just about taking down one corrupt family. It was about showing that truth could defeat power, that documentation could topple dynasties, that ordinary people who kept records could change everything. Dorothy and I founded the Chen Reeves Justice Initiative 3 months later. We provided legal support for whistleblowers, protected evidence for workers documenting abuse, and created safe spaces for people to share their stories without fear. The Ashfords spent everything on legal fees, but couldn't buy their way out. Richard was convicted on 23 counts, Victoria on 18. They each received 35 years in prison. Damien finished his rehabilitation program at 19. He gave one interview, 3 years after the champagne incident. He said, I was raised to believe people like Ms. Reeves didn't matter, that our money and name meant we could do anything without consequences. Watching them go to prison, losing everything, finally taught me they were wrong. He'd never be forgiven by everyone. Shouldn't be, but at least he'd learned the lesson his parents never would. Privilege is not protection, and champagne stains wash away, but recorded truth lasts forever. 5 years later, on Christmas Eve 2029, I stood in the Chen Reeves Justice Initiative headquarters, watching snowfall outside. Dorothy had passed away the previous spring at 79. Surrounded by family, having lived long enough to see the empire she'd helped topple turn into something better. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Ms. Reeves, my name is Sarah Kim. I worked for the Rothmore family for 20 years. I have evidence of things they've done. I kept journals like Ms. Chen. I'm ready to speak. Can you help me? I smiled and typed back. Yes, come to our office tomorrow. You're not alone. Because that was Dorothy's real legacy. Not destroying the Ashfords,
but showing countless others that their voices mattered, their evidence had power, and staying silent was no longer the only option. The champagne had washed away years ago, but the change it sparked continued spreading, one documented truth at a time. If you enjoyed this story, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's video. I've picked 2 special stories just for you on screen. Have an amazing day.